Welcome, Meteor fans. I am today's Q&A host, Josh Owens, the Meteor Club Q&A. This is the April edition, and we're talking with David Weldon from Edthena. Welcome, David.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So I really to me, you've put out a number of pretty good articles about maybe easy developer mistakes, and then like security and a lot of stuff around that. So I wanted to maybe touch on security. It's not something we've touched on a ton in the past. We've touched a little bit on scaling and that kind of thing, or like running a development shop or stuff like that, but not a ton around security. So wanted to kind of have an angle on that, I guess. Yeah, so why don't you talk for a second about the article, I guess the browser policy article you wrote.
Well, first let me say we really have implemented most of the features that Emily talked about in her first security talk, the one was the, like Meteor versus Mallory. And I really recommend that everybody just Google that, look it up on YouTube. It's really good. It's from a dev shop talk in like 2 years ago, and most of the stuff that you're gonna encounter is covered by the talk. And I think not a lot of people thought it was interesting maybe at the time, but didn't really take it all in. But we went and implemented everything she talked about in that talk. So we've been using pretty much all those techniques for the last 2 years. And browser policy is one of them. I was a really early adopter of that, and actually gave her feedback at the time about things that didn't work cross-browser, bugs in the packages. But anyway, yeah, that was a really particularly interesting case because as I put in the article, I wasn't really sure like any of those conditions would ever get hit. I guess one of them was at a very in a very simple way, where we had a package, or we had a third-party service that was doing something not allowed in our browser policy. Like I think they were doing eval as part of JSON parsing or something. And so I wrote to that third party and said, hey, you're using eval. Could you stop that, please? And they were super helpful about it. And that got cleaned up. And then it went a long time, like a year or more, until we had the Superfish situation, where Lenovo was essentially installing malware on new laptops, and it was just doing all sorts of bad, essentially taking over your HTTP sessions and forcibly loading one of their scripts onto every page rendered on your browser. And interestingly, our browser policy, well, it caught that, because it said, well, you can't load scripts that we haven't specifically given permission to. And then for reasons I don't completely understand, that made it so the users that were having that issue couldn't actually log into this site. So we got support tickets that just look like, well, we see a spinner and we can't log into the site. And under circumstances where we're completely lost, we'll ask the users to give us a console log dump. And we looked at that, and then I did a little bit more investigation, and then it was clear, wow, this is Superfish. Terrific, you've been infected. And that cleared it up. But it was pretty neat to see it in action like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I kind of wrote an article about like why you should use Meteor settings rather than putting like keys directly in your code. And part of that, like I referenced Superfish, and it was kind of funny. Like it was just like this ethereal thing that could possibly happen, right? Like somehow your circle of trust is getting broken somewhere along the line that you're not aware of, and all of a sudden like someone's able to take some of your keys or something. And here is like an actual, I mean, the attack vector is from the other side, right, from the client, but it's really kind of interesting to see that happening. That's awesome. Awesome article.
Nice.
So, I forgot to say, like, what is Athena? What are you guys doing there?
Oh yeah, I guess I should give you the pitch. Yeah, so Athena is a video-based platform for helping teachers get better at teaching. That's sort of a simple way to say it. So the mechanics of that look like a teacher goes out into the classroom and records him or herself just doing a normal classroom session, and then he or she can upload that video into our platform and then invite whomever they like, whether that's a professor or another teaching professional or colleague or what have you. And then those people can collaborate together and essentially leave that teacher comments in the timeline. And you can say, right at 14 minutes and 5 seconds, you answer a question like this, but you should have used this particular strategy when talking to the student, that sort of thing. And you can have a whole discussion around what could have been improved. Yeah, that's the idea. We sell primarily to departments of education and universities right now, but we're also branching that to K-12.
Nice. So, I mean, does the school contact you and generally like buy a block of like review time with you guys, or how does that work? Like, does a teacher just say, "Hey, I want to get better," and like they'll get started themselves?
That's the end game. We far in the future, we want to have a marketplace where essentially any teacher can contact us and say, "Hey, I'm an 8th grade science teacher, and I need help with this," and we'll hook you up with someone who's an expert in that particular thing. Right now, we don't do any of the coaching ourselves. We just provide the tools, the platform to do it. So it looks like we make a sale to someone like the University of Washington, their Department of Ed, and then all their students use it in all their classes. And then they have professionals on staff, of course, they're professors or TAs or whoever, that can give them advice.
Nice. Okay. Makes sense. I find it so funny. I think there's another educational space. I don't know. Is it a competitor that's using Meteor as well? Are they doing something slightly different?
Yeah. So there's another startup that does something pretty similar that also uses.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right, so let's get into some of these questions. So this one's from Meteor. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And he says, what's the most awesome thing that Meteor allows your app to do?
Huh. I'd actually say the most awesome thing that Meteor allows our app to do is not in the main app. It's in the uploader. So the really weird and interesting technology piece that we use, and I really probably should have done a demo of this a long time ago, but I just never found time. Yeah. So what we have, our app is broken up into pieces, but you can think about it as a main piece, which is the video collaboration, logging in and doing groups and things like that piece, and an uploader. And so what we had to solve early on was the problem where any teacher recording with any video device should be able to upload into our platform without a problem. And a problem might be your camera is weird and old, or your internet connection is shaky, or whatever. We just want to make it as seamless as possible. And so we found out for a lot of experimentation, the right way to do that is to transcode the video prior to upload. So what we find is that, sorry, this would be a long path to get to the answer, but hopefully it's interesting. Did I just lose you?
No, I turned down my bandwidth a little bit. We're getting some kind of stuttering problem, so.
Okay. Let's see. So what we found was that the video inputs often were gigabytes. So they might only record the 30 minutes of video when you get this 10 or 20 gigabyte video, depending on the recording settings of your device. And so we didn't think it was reasonable to either limit users to 5 minutes of video, or B, do something like upload 20 gigabytes and just cross over and hope for the best. So the solution we came up with was transcode all the video on the user's machine prior to being uploaded, which is really interesting because it allows you to do things like the user can select their own thumbnail and trim the video and rotate it if they want to. So essentially what we built is this little tool that allows you to do some light video editing and also get a much smaller version of the video. And then that tool uses Meteor and is cross-platform. So we're using Node WebKit, or I think it just got rebranded to nj.js or something, or nw.js. Yeah, so we use Node WebKit to build a cross-platform version of our uploader that then can do all the mechanics of the video transcoding, but also handle all the uploading in a pretty sophisticated way. So it's resumable and handles those internet faults and things like that. What's awesome is the fact that you're using Meteor on that. So not only can the user actually log in and verify that they are a user, have a valid account, and have the rights to upload, but also I can hot push code, which was really critical when figuring out something as complicated as doing video transcoding. It just took us a really long time, lots of iterations, and seeing all kinds of failures and what was happening on the client, to be able to figure out the billion settings it takes in order to make that transcoding process work really smoothly for everybody. So being able to hot push code changes times a week or whatever was really important, especially early on. Yeah, so that uploader is an amazing piece of technology, and Meteor really helps make that happen.
Nice. That's actually pretty amazing. I'm a little surprised that I would have never thought to have done that. So I mean, I guess because you're using Node WebKit, you're just able to use some Node libraries to handle the transcoding then?
Yeah, it's really neat. So we use pretty much everybody that's doing transcoding is using FFmpeg under the hood. So what we actually do is ship Node Web with FFmpeg, with an FFmpeg binary for that particular OS that you're installing for. And then, yeah, so I'm using Meteor obviously to do all the scripting on the client, but I also have the benefit of being able to use Node WebKit calls, which allow you to touch the hard disk. So and actually make OS level calls. So I can call out to the binary, stream its output, and then touch the disk and say like, oh, okay, was the file written? Are we sure it's done? You know, that sort of thing. And then read back out and ship it to our servers.
So, I mean, like let's say, I mean, you've got a 10 gig file, like how long does that typically take on the client to transcode and then kind of get uploaded and done?
Yeah, so our goal, we don't always hit this, but on average, we do. Our goal is to do the full process, transcode and upload, in roughly the same time, roughly the duration of the video. So if you shoot 30 minutes of video, in general, within a few percent, we can get the whole process done in 30 minutes.
Nice. That's pretty awesome. All right.
But if we didn't transcode it, it might take you 5 hours to upload that video. So it's a good trade-off, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So back to security, maybe. Do you have a checklist you go through to make sure you've covered all the important security checklists, even if maybe it's in your head? And I know you mentioned that the talk that Emily did So, I mean, are you generally just using that as your checklist, or are you doing like?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at anybody's blogs in security, like I don't think anybody's written anything that isn't in that talk. So we added all those features as soon as that talk came out. And we don't really, I mean, we have a couple, we have the uploader and some other side apps. So it's not like we're in a situation where we're constantly starting fresh with an app all the time. We just follow the patterns that we already established.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you force me to list them out, I probably could. But,
Well, I mean, if you're using this, like, you know what? Honestly, I'll probably just go through and turn this talk into a checklist, right? People would probably like that. Yeah, this is some awesome stuff. I found our slides here. So it's Meteor Meet Mallory.
Yeah,
is the name of the talk, and I don't know. I haven't found the YouTube yet, but we'll probably link it up in the show notes or something. All right.
Yeah, it's basically like add audit argument checks, and and then she goes into some detail about like what an injection attack look like, and use browser policy, transmit over HTTPS. Yeah, like those are really the basics, and then you have all the stuff that you and I have written about, like. Which I don't know that she covers, but like the crazy user stuff, like don't expose all of your users' data. Use fields.
Yeah. I guess that's a good one too. Like the field stuff. For people that are new, they might not realize. Like if you go in and say, hey, I mean, Telescope's a great example of this, right? Like you want to expose, hey, this user left a comment, and you want their name and you want their profile picture. And if you just do a straight up user.find and then publish that, you're actually publishing like their keys, like their not their keys, their encrypted passwords, and if they use like OAuth, you're exposing their tokens and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, if you did an audit of like 80% of if you did an audit of the apps in the wild, I bet like 80% of them would be violating that.
Yeah. That was a big one we found pretty early on when I was working at Differential, and it was like, wait a minute, this is like someone's password right here. Whoops.
Yeah.
Yes, we definitely published to production. Probably the worst one I saw though was a client I had that they were making client-side API calls to Google Calendar, and so they were exposing all the necessary OAuth tokens to make those calls from the client. And there was a bug where they were publishing, like anyone you invited to the event, if they had the calendar token, then their calendar token was getting exposed as well. And so you could realistically gather all that data and start making API calls to other people's calendars.
That's another category of stuff, like don't expose your keys to the client, or if, in general, just really try not to do that. Both through calls, but also I mean, a really simple trick is just put the stuff that needs to be on the server under your server directory, and it won't get pushed to the client via code. I mean, you have two exposure points. One is like a method that you can access data, and the other one is like the data is physically like on the user's machine.
Well, it was interesting though, because I think this paradigm was this was a Percolate app that I took over, and the paradigm was interesting in the fact that they were using the client browser as almost like a background worker, right? Like they were making the API calls and fetching the data and then inserting it into the Meteor app, it was very, very different approach, and I think it could be practical. The problem was there was a bug in the user.find that they were doing. They were taking options, but they weren't passing that on to the find call. And so even though I was saying like don't expose all the fields, that was never getting passed on. So it was just something wasn't fully hooked up, and it caused the issue. But it was kind of interesting to see someone take the approach of like your clients are your background processors. So, all right. Here we go. Well, we always touch on scaling, I guess. So I guess we'll touch on it again. How many servers do you guys have? Have you run into any quirks with scaling a production Meteor app so far?
Yeah, so I'd rather not give specific like user counts and server numbers and things like that. I'll say that we've done a pretty good job of scaling our app as Meteor progressed from the technical perspective. So we started writing Athena in Meteor around 05 something or early 06 something. Yeah, I mean, by the time we launched in August of 2013, we didn't have any issues really that looked too much like scaling. By that December, what had happened is more users were on the platform, and what we've noticed, especially the pattern, a pattern we've noticed with educators is both the professors and the students wait till the absolute last minute to do practically everything. So all the reviews or grades or whatever were due in December, and we had quote unquote a lot of people on the site at the same time. So by today's standards, pretty low. It's like 20 concurrent users, right? And we had a lot of reactive joins, and we had a very complicated join that was unfortunately on the user's homepage. So we got to the point that was so far that has been the only fire drill that we've had running Meteor, where it was like, oh my god, Saturday night there are 25 people all on, and I was resetting the server, or resetting the process every 30 minutes because it would just ping the CPU. It was a nightmare. So a couple of things fixed that. One was the extremely expensive join that was on the user's dashboard. I made that not reactive, and in fact cached the result per user for like 5 or 10 minutes at a time. That was a big improvement. And then like 2 weeks later, Oplog came out. Or Oplog tailing, I should say. So the ability to do that was a total game changer. So it definitely got to the point, or right at the point where we were possibly screwed, and then tailing came out, and then everything was fine. And we've made through the use of Kadira and just more knowledge about how to do these things, we certainly made improvements over time, and now we hovered around 2 or 3% CU constantly, and it's not a problem. The thing that I worry a little bit about, not so much today, but a little bit about is it's something that I think you and I have discussed in the past, which is when you go to deploy on any given process, all of everything resets. So every user needs to reconnect and fetch all of their data, and some of those subscriptions might be very complicated and CPU intensive. So you might have a steady state of 2 or 3%, but on deploy you might go up to 80 or 90, and that worries me a bit. Right now it's not pegging the CPU, so I don't really notice it. But if it started to, I guess I'd have to deploy at night, or I don't know. I haven't explored like the whole cluster thing or any of that. My approach at the moment has been to ignore it until Galaxy comes out, but I don't know if that's a thing that's going to happen this year or not. I don't really know what their schedule is.
Yeah, so I heard whisperings last time I was out in San Francisco that it was going to be like maybe they'll be doing like private alpha stuff in late April or sometime in May, and so I think late April is here. So maybe we're looking at like mid-May, late May, something like that. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it
that's called May. So
what was that? You broke up.
I hasn't picked up the phone to the system, so I don't know anymore about that.
Huh. We're still getting some kind of breakup in the connection there.
Are you okay? My internet might not be the best here.
Yeah, I think it's on your end. Everyone says I'm clear. All right, consider that one done. So we're speaking of like hosting. Where are you guys hosting right now?
Hang on, I'm just fooling with my internet connections. Can you hear me okay now?
It's okay. We're still getting like a slight stutter, but
okay. Sorry. Let's see, we are hosted on EC2. So I'm pretty good with Bash scripts. So before MUP and all that stuff, I just came up with a bunch of scripts to do our deployment. And it seems to work fine. I haven't had a problem. Our database is on Compose. So I've been with them for a long time also, since before they were doing the current really awesome deal. We had a private cluster just so we can get oblog tailing, which was expensive, but worth it for the performance gains. But now that they've gone to, I can't remember the name of their product now, but that thing.
Elastic Deploy.
Yes, thank you. It's gotten a lot easier.
Yeah. So did you guys switch to Elastic Deploy when it came out, or are you still on your private setup?
No. Yeah, we switched to Elastic Deploy like 2 minutes after it came out.
Okay. So like I've often thought about this and haven't really talked about it much. I've talked about it, I think, privately to Compose, but they don't turn on SSL by default with their Elastic Deploy. So how are you feeling about security in regards to shipping kind of clear text between Mongo and your Meteor app? Do you feel like that's like a vulnerability point and you wish they would fix that, or maybe not such a big deal?
Well, it absolutely is a vulnerability point. However, we don't suffer from it because our boxes are in EC2 East. So I've had this conversation with them also. So if you are hosted in the same data center, the bits are guaranteed not to leave the data center. So we're secure despite the fact that they're not encrypted.
Well, but I mean, theoretically, if I spun up a box in EC2 East, I could start maybe sniffing your traffic, right?
That's a discussion for someone who knows the internals of how Amazon's network works. I hope the answer would be no. So yeah, the outside world can't see it. I've had that discussion with the guys at Compose a long time ago. Within Amazon, that's true. I would be a little surprised if that's actually something that's possible. It would shock me that you'd be able to sniff traffic from other connections, even on the same machine, let alone somewhere else in the data center. That would be kind of crazy to me. But yeah, so I'm not too worried about it. The thing that does concern me though is Compose doesn't make that obvious. Like nowhere is that obvious. So I only asked the question because I knew that their traffic wasn't encrypted. So I figured there must be something that makes that okay. So I don't. Yeah, like. They might have a blog post about this. They blog a lot, so I would be surprised if they didn't. But there's certainly nothing on the homepage that says, "Oh, by the way, unless you're hosted here, or here, we have a security issue."
Right. Yeah, I've also talked to them about it too, and like generally, like I've emailed Jason and we've talked a little bit about it, but I still had further questions and never really heard back from him. I don't know. I feel like, I mean, if your server can talk to their server, then I feel like maybe if there's not SSL, like someone could pick up that packet. Again, you're right. I probably don't know enough about the internals of Amazon's networking to know if this is possible. So if we have like a TCP/IP networking expert in the audience, they should totally chime in. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it can't be this hard for them to turn on the SSL, right? Like to me, from what I've read, I haven't tried this myself. It's just a compile time option, and then like they issue a certificate, and I'm pretty sure they can just be self-signed certificates. So I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't investigated that at all. But if that's a possibility, I think that would be a great selling point for them, and I would certainly, that's one more thing I could tell a user.
Yeah.
And it would help me sleep better at night.
All right. So I don't know if I know of any. I'm not sure if we can answer this one, but Dave Anderson from the Meteor Club Slack chat room asked, "What do you think are the next security issues that should be addressed by MDG?"
Well, the easy one that I can at least speak to immediately is the whole just users debacle. I mean, we've touched on it a bit already with overpublished stuff, but the fact that the user's profile is editable by default is not good, and that's really not made clear. I mean, some of this is just like the facts need to be made clear because you really need to be in the know on 5 or 6 different details regarding the user's collection that just are kind of scattered around the documentation and really not clear, and every one of them can cause a security problem. I addressed 2 of them in my common mistakes article, but yeah, just users being screwy is not good from a security perspective, and I think there's some hackpad where people are talking about ways that can be improved, and maybe Meteor 2.0 or something.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, after I wrote my article, number one, like at least on Reddit, I got a lot of like backlash about like overplaying, how it's not a secure or like a serious issue for developers. And I said, honestly, like as soon as I stop seeing people make this mistake, I will not consider it as a serious issue anymore, right? Like I still, to this day, will find people that have no idea that the profile is completely writable and they put all kinds of security information in it. And,
yeah, I mean, I would go so far as to say 100% of new users will not notice that one line in the documentation and just do it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you're totally opening yourself up, and once Meteor gets popular enough to the point where a lot of big apps are using it, at least one of them will make this mistake, and then Meteor will be deemed insecure based on this one problem.
Right. Which
is unfortunate because there are so many good things from a security perspective about Meteor. Certainly in the other web frameworks platforms that I looked at in the past, Meteor really does it right in almost every way, but there are like, a handful of small things that you have to know about. And this is one of those that seems like it's hard to know about and should just be mechanically different to the user.
Right. I had a talk with Sashko. He's the one that started the Hackpad, and he was taking kind of feedback. And I just said, like, I don't know what it's going to take to move this forward. Like, I'm happy to submit a pull request if you guys are okay with my thoughts on it. But I really just think profiles are fine. I think the profile subdocument is fine. I think having it be editable by default is where the confusion's at. So let's just take that out, right? Like, let's remove that rule and just go with regular old allow deny. That's pretty straightforward and standard, and people can customize if they want.
Yeah, at the minimum, that seems perfectly reasonable, because I think probably most people just don't even realize that it's editable.
Right.
So
I love the fact that I can stash data there. I can push some kind of data there on user sign up or something, and then that data comes along with user accounts pretty easily. So.
Yep. It's a good choice.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like Sashko went on vacation. I haven't heard back yet, so I'll probably follow up with him. And the other interesting thing to me is that 1.0 came out. Actually, oh 09, was it 09.2, where they introduced the debug only flag. And it occurred to me that I think Insecure and Autopublish are okay training wheels for people getting started, but they shouldn't be packages that necessarily survive into production. And I'd love to see those marked as debug only.
Yeah, I agree. There should be something that happened there. It doesn't seem right to potentially have a security issue in a large number of apps just because you want a user's first 5 minutes to be great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would totally agree. And so we kind of went back and forth, and Sashko pointed out that he thought having the auto publish might be a legitimate thing that people want to do, because it doesn't actually publish the user stuff, just everything else in your database. But that insecure, he could see that being a potential security hole, and maybe we mark that debug only going forward.
Yes, although I can't remember the details. If you have auto publish on, I think all the users' account information is exposed. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's right. I wanted to say I did a test once where if you add any users and auto publish is on, then if you do a user's find, you'll actually see all of the password credentials.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true anymore.
Maybe that was old. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to do a little test on that. Yeah.
If that's not true, then yeah, I buy that. Auto publishing on isn't nearly as bad as the other.
Insecure. Yeah, and I've seen people, publish to production with Insecure still being installed. So
yeah, or at a minimum, if you deploy somewhere, it should say, "Oh my God." Red.
Yeah, that's what I suggested as well. So when you add like a publication in and you still have auto publish installed, it's like, oh hey, you've published some data, but you have auto publish installed. Like, we should do a similar thing. When you build, it should say, hey, you still have Insecure installed. But I still think, to me, the default should really be, let's just rip out Insecure and install Mongool. I think Mongool's way better.
Okay.
Have you used it yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, you should immediately go install that.
Yeah, I've seen the video. I was just gonna say it's funny. I occasionally see Stack Overflow questions for that situation you just described, which was I have auto publish on and I've added publisher. Boy, this warning is annoying. Can I remove the warning without removing auto publish? I think I discovered some like hack you can do to make that happen. And I told them about the answer, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it is right now.
Nice. Yeah, so Sashko and I were talking about like having maybe separate packages like auto publish non-warning or something like that. If you cared about that, like it would not warn you. I don't know. All right. Well, so I'm going to take this question from Junior Ally, but I'm going to maybe adapt it. He said, are any agencies or companies out there currently looking for Meteor developers? I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say, are you guys hiring?
In fact, we are.
Nice.
Thank you for teeing that up for me. Yeah, so we are hiring. I usually post it as a front-end developer position, largely because, hey, it's Meteor. There's less back-end to write. So that's the good news. Bad news is, maybe bad news is, it narrows the search a bit to someone who's pretty focused on making the front end happen. That's maybe like 70% of the job, and the other 30% is helping to do things that still look like back end, which methods, stuff like that. database migrations and things. So it's really a full stack job, but I like to publish it as front end. But yeah, we're looking for someone, and that someone could be a Meteor expert, but it doesn't have to be. I'm happy to put in the time to train anybody who knows JavaScript well already.
Nice. And so is remote okay? Are you guys looking for like San Francisco based people or what?
Yeah, I mean, we're a really small team, and we like the idea of all being together in the same place. And so we're really looking to hire just for our San Francisco office.
Okay. So are you guys in San Francisco proper? Or are you guys a little south there or what?
We're in San Francisco proper. I mean, we're Sonoma.
Okay. Yeah.
We're all kids just hang out.
Well, I had a friend of mine who lives in Cupertino, and like he was contemplating taking a job in like somewhere like in the Market District and or down by Market Street, and he was like, "Man, my commute's going to be an hour and a half," and I'm like, "That sounds terrible." So he ended up like just not taking the job because he didn't want the commute more than anything.
Yeah.
Funny. All right. And yeah, so the other thing I would say is I actually know like David Sikora. I hope I'm saying his name right.
Mm-hmm.
He works for your competitor. Man, I really...
He does indeed.
I cannot think of the name of their... It's like...
It's Torch.
Torch. Thank you. All right. And I know they're hiring, but so if you're interested in New Orleans, they're definitely hiring, and they want people in the city there. And I know like Differential's generally always looking for people. I think OK Grow just hired someone. WorkPop, they're in LA, and they're looking for people they'd prefer on site. So I think there's a number of like startups that are hiring right now that, you know, if you're willing to move, you've got your pick of good cities, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I've always got overflow jobs too. So if people are looking for work, they should contact me too. All right. So we're down to the last question. Maybe we'll get some more here. If you're watching, ask more questions, or we'll just make stuff up. So Ben Costanza wants to know, what are you guys doing for testing?
Yeah, great question. Up until a few months ago, the answer was nothing. We went a long time without having any tests. And yeah, recently it's we have a handful of collections which interact with each other in very complicated ways. Just the business rules are super complicated. There's good reasons behind them. All those rules really help users just do magic automatically. But it's hard for the developers. So my strategy lately has been to start moving the collections and all of their methods and their hooks and their helpers and all that and their transforms, all that stuff into one package per collection, and then applying tiny tests to it. And I realize that I'm saying this right as velocity is getting to the point where it's probably almost usable. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anyone there.
It's totally true, because I mean, like Sam and I joke about it all the time. Like the hardest thing you can do with velocity right now is write a book about it, because there's so much stuff, like little things that aren't done right. And, like you spend your time trying to fix velocity or trying to fix the framework rather than writing a book. So I would totally agree with that.
Right. And I think I heard you interviewed on something where you said something like, well, I spent 3 days trying to figure out like how to do this one testing thing. And I heard that and I was like, all right, well, I feel better in my choice to use tiny tests, because there were definitely some quirks to work out. And I've talked a little bit about this on Meteor forums lately, but some mucking and stubbing kind of stuff that was a little bit tricky to figure out. But once that was done, everything seems to be working swimmingly.
I think the only thing with tiny test is you have to be willing to get in there and look at MDG's code and figure out how they're testing things, and then kind of follow their patterns.
Yeah, and kind of make your own. There's definitely stuff like I said, I had to figure out, like, it's better to declare your if you're going to declare collections, it's better to declare them as unmanaged so they don't run into each other after each test. It's better to have a reset that explicitly does all that, but also handles the cases where you're using a collection that is managed, exported by another collection, and it has to reset that in a different way. It's just that sort of stuff needs to be figured out. It took me a day or two of doing it wrong to get that right, but now, regardless of what testing framework we're using, the story is that we have a lot of tests around our most complicated collection interactions. So I'm a lot more happy about that.
Yeah, nice. So, I mean, I guess that means that you're probably pushing a lot of your, at least the code you want to test, are being pushed into packages?
Yeah. So we found over time that it was really helpful to move a lot of our code out of templates and more into kind of like a model layer. So we've had a lot of success with the last few big projects that we've done, where we have fairly complicated models that have a lot of transforms. So and then as you might know, I'm a big proponent of having not doing client-side operations, so I do everything through methods. So the methods the clients tend to look fairly simple. They just invoke some method, and the method has all of the complexity in it, but performs all the complicated checks to ensure that no bad data enters the database. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff to say about moving things to packages. You get the advantage of having all that code in one place. You can just say, okay, I want to talk about this particular my posts question or whatever, and then have all the stuff related to toasts in one place. But then through the magic of tiny tests, you can actually test it all in some reasonable way.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess that maybe leads into the next question, which was any application architecture choices that you made initially when the app was small that you would change now that you've built a larger app, or I guess you maybe have changed as you've moved into a larger app? Or
a lot of things have changed as has gone. The thing, moving a lot of stuff to the model layer is definitely a good example of that. Our templates were much too complicated. That's probably the biggest one. There are some naming convention kind of choices that we made. Some data modeling choices where you just don't know what you don't know, and then until you actually, write the next 20,000 lines of code, you don't realize that, like, oh, that was actually a terrible idea, and now we're kind of stuck with it. Some of those I'm gonna change in the next year, maybe. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So Sasha had a great article on that. It's like the unknown, or like when you're playing StarCraft. I love this reference. Like, it's the fog of war, right? And you can't see the whole map, but as you explore it, you start to understand at least the layout of the map. So it's definitely one of those things, like, you start to understand as you build a bigger app. So you touched a little on Node WebKit. The next question is actually, it has to do with iOS and Android, and I'm assuming they're maybe talking about Cordova as well. have you faced any problems with iOS or Android platforms? Currently, my apps don't seem to run on certain Android devices, new and old. So that's from Junior. Have you guys used Cordova at all?
So only experimentally. So we actually had Mike Rissy come in here and do a little work for us to try to figure out like what would be the mechanics of moving some of our uploaders to an iOS app. And so he kind of demonstrated like, okay, this is the kind of performance you can get. Here's what the phone gives you. Here's what it would look like on Android. That was a really interesting experience. Yeah, I can only speak to what he kind of showed me, which was the bottom line seemed like for what we were doing, which is video recording and transcoding, it seemed like iOS was a little more advanced than everything else. Like they have some inbuilt transcoder that does a lot of stuff for you. You can have access to that from the app. But on Android, it was a total mess. So beyond that, I don't have anything, any wisdom to dispel about or to give out about either of these platforms.
Yeah, honestly, like to me, I think at least Junior's question about his app doesn't seem to run on certain Android devices, new and old. I would almost say like maybe that's an issue of the platforms making, right? Like I don't know. I honestly, you probably face this. You just haven't found an iPhone old enough, just because most people hate older iOSs and upgrade their phones. I don't know. Like,
so is the question actually deploying specifically to that device, or is the question just like my web app doesn't work on iOS?
It was more my web app doesn't work on certain Android devices, new and old. And I would just say like, even though we have Cordova, doesn't mean like it's a panacea or it's going to fix all your problems, or even like you mentioned, just because we have Cordova and we have access to plugins doesn't mean that the plugins well written or the API that we need or the code that we need has been exposed on the platform, right? And it sounds like you guys are doing transcoding, and you said iOS is, from what you could tell, doing a better job. So that's probably a fundamental OS difference.
Yeah. To address the actual original question there, I didn't realize was mostly web based. I still don't have much information there. We do play around with different devices when we test our app, but frankly, we don't spend a lot of time doing responsive design. So the site doesn't always look. We try to make the site somewhat usable on phone, but it's not really our first goal.
Right.
We expect that most people are doing this on their desktop, so it's not something that we run into a lot.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. Like, are you guys thinking about maybe doing an iOS Cordova application where like people can actually just do the recording right there, and then it'll get uploaded instantly from their phone? Because I noticed, like, that's you could buy.
Yeah, that's what I meant with Mike helping us experiment with that. That's definitely something we're looking into. We want to have a mobile app, but I just don't know if it's going to be. We're just deciding, like, do we white label somebody else's thing? Do we write our own? If we write our own, does it need to be native? Should it be a Meteor app? What are all the trade-offs? That's sort of what we're trying to evaluate right now.
Yeah.
I will say that like one random thing that we encountered with mobile devices and video was I can't recall if this is just iOS or if it's all the mobile devices, but there's something that forces you to actually hit a play button in order to start prefetching the video, which I didn't realize. So if you have an HTML player, and if you're running on a desktop, you can tell the players to start prefetching the video, but on a mobile device, it will refuse to do so. So I had this thing where there was a like, it's loading screen, and the loading screen would block the buttons, but on an iOS it would block the buttons, and those are the same buttons you had to hit in order to avoid the loading screen. So it was it was like months where we had people complaining that you couldn't actually use the thing on an iPhone. I was just like, all right, I'm going to spend an entire day and figure out what the magic is to make this happen. And finally, it was just like, oh, this is the stupid restriction, so we'll just remove the loading screen for iOS devices.
That's funny. Nice. All right. So we're kind of out of questions there. We got through, 10 of them? That's pretty good. That seems to be about average usually.
Pretty good. We haven't talked about Stack Overflow. It's like the one thing.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because you're like one of the top answers on Stack Overflow, right?
I'm currently ranked number 2 in the world for Meteor.
Nice. Number 2. We'll just call it number 2 in the world.
Qualifying it with is it Meteor? Yeah, is definitely reduces the effect, but yeah, I spend time on there every day. I like to try to answer one question a day. I don't always make it, but I definitely read. I read probably more than 90% of the titles, and then of the actual questions, I might read half of them. So if you're posting on Stack Overflow, I'm really likely to see it.
That's kind of crazy. That's like volunteering your time, basically, right?
Yeah. It's kind of an addiction. I try not to indulge myself too much when I'm at work. And then, my wife gets annoyed while I do it at home. So it's I have to limit the amount of time I spend on there. But it's fun helping people, and I enjoy doing it for the most part.
Yeah. See, now I always have trouble. I don't know, Stack Overflow is okay to me, but people want very specific answers. I tend to myself, like, I'll answer a lot of Quora questions because they seem to be more like high level, cerebral, like, why should I use this or that, or what are the benefits here, those kinds of things. But yeah, that's pretty crazy. So someone wants to know who's number 1.
His handle is Akshat, but it's I can't remember the guy's name. He's in the UK, I think.
Nice.
I don't remember. It doesn't have much in his profile. I did know the guy's name at one point, but now I can't remember it.
That's crazy. All right.
He answered a lot of a lot of really early questions. So that's the thing about these subject specific accumulating points in a subject is if you get in early and answer a ton of questions, you'll keep getting the benefits of those over time. So he and I can do nothing and still get 3-4 votes a day on top of whatever we're answering. So unless he dropped off the face of the planet and I answered 5 questions today, it'd be hard to imagine catching up with him at this point. But
that's funny. Yeah. So I'm less familiar with Stack Overflow. I've answered some questions there, and I know it's weird because you have to get points before you can do certain actions too.
Right.
Like leaving a comment. Like I had to just go through and answer a bunch of questions and try to get points because I wanted to be able to leave a comment.
Yeah. The commenting thing is very restrictive, but I can see good reasons for it. Want random people creating accounts and then just causing all sorts of problems with moderators.
Yeah. All right. So we got one question, but it was in the chat window rather than in the topics. Do you have time for one more? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. We'll take it. So this is from Manfred. He said, I am from a non-tech background, want to be tech entrepreneur. Let's say I'm fortunate enough to get my app made myself. How do I make sure it's tested and secure and all that other stuff? That's a big question. I don't know. I feel like we kind of covered it a little bit. So I don't know. Would you have anything to add there?
I don't know. not really. I mean, read. Do the you want to watch the video that I'm assuming you're putting in the notes, and read the articles on security. That'll cover you there. And what was the other part of the question?
Just testing.
Testing.
Yeah.
I would say. I mean, you know more about testing than I do. I just.
Yeah, I would say like if you really want to make sure your app's tested, and I would seriously take a look at Cucumber and try to get started there. Sam's done a complete rewrite of it in the last 2 weeks, and I think it's gotten better. I haven't had the chance to upgrade my app yet to see if it works better, but it definitely looked better from what I saw.
I would say probably if you have a new app, then diving right into Velocity seems like it makes a lot of sense, because I think that's probably going to be the future. In my case, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. I didn't mean to say like, oh, well, screw Velocity, it has to be a tiny test. In our particular situation, I didn't feel like I was in a situation where I could do testing and spend a lot of time figuring out Velocity, do the testing, and then like 3 weeks later fix the test after all the bugs have been fixed, and then 3 weeks later fix the test. So I didn't think that was a reasonable choice for me, so I went with something that I think is probably going to be stable for another year. Yeah, I mean, if you're starting out with nothing, you might as well use the new hotness, which is going to be Velocity anyway.
Yeah, I would actually I would take the opposite stance of you, having documented tiny test, right? Like that was the one chapter I had in my book that was complete before I gave up on it. And like tiny test is the absolute most ghetto part of Meteor. It's like non-documented. Their matchers are just what they wanted. Like I remember going in and finding a matcher, and it said what it should do, but it didn't do what it needed to do. And so like that was my very first commit to Meteor, was to fix that matcher. But it's definitely like not a place that they put a lot of thought or time into, and I think it's obvious. I mean, their test runner is kind of cool, right? Because it fires up a second Meteor app and it'll run all your tests and show you pass or fail, and that stuff's kind of awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think our tests are like super sophisticated where you need all kinds of like really like crazy magic. It's more like insert stuff in the database, do some transforms. Did it work?
Yeah, definitely.
If there's one thing I can interject also on the Stack Overflow stuff, if we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, no.
My general advice would be to anyone in the community listening to this that wants to post questions into Stack Overflow. It's a handful of things that I think will really help your experience. I should have probably listed these out, written them down. I'll try to do them from memory. I've always intended to write a blog post about this, but I haven't gotten around to it. So I'd say the first thing you should do is Google your question. And I specifically say Google because do not use Stack Overflow's search tool. Yeah. It's terrible. Google actually does a much better job of searching Stack Overflow than Stack Overflow does. So search your thing, and there's probably about a 50% chance you're going to find something pretty close, and that might solve your issue before you bother to answer. Otherwise, I'm going to have to mark your thing as a duplicate. So you just save time by doing that. So the next thing is, if you can't find it, try to reproduce your problem. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is not specific to Meteor. This is just general. How do you debug computer programs? Reproduce your problem like in a totally separate contained environment. Like create a new app, insert code, and see if it fails in the same way.
Well, honestly, I'd take that a step further and say, like, you mentioned Mike Rissy, and he did a good job on Meteor interviews, but like use MeteorPad and reproduce your bug right there, right? Because then that becomes shareable and linkable, even better.
Yeah, when you go to post it, that's fine. It might be a lot faster to just do it locally first before you put it on MeteorPad, but sure. The point is going through that exercise of taking the part that you think isn't going to work and then putting it somewhere else, running it, and seeing if it still doesn't work. And there's another key part of this, which is do it in as few lines as possible. So what you want to do is remove all of the stuff that has nothing to do with the problem. And anyone listening, this is key. Remove all the stuff that has nothing to do with the problem, because that is all stuff that I need to read and then try to mentally figure out whether it actually has to do with the problem. Once you've done all of that and you still have a problem, and like probably enough half of the time, you're going to figure out like, oh, well, once I've reproduced it, it's not a problem anymore. Therefore, what's the difference? And you might be able to debug the issue from there. If it's still a problem at that point, then write a question and paste whatever code is necessary, the very reduced code, hopefully. Yeah. And when you do that, the only other piece of advice I would give on question asking would be try to make it as general as possible. So if you write not only in your code but in your question things that are really specific to your problem, and maybe they have to be, but if they don't have to be, don't get really specific. And the reason for that is fewer people will see the question, and fewer people will upvote you. Fewer people will find this question helpful in the future if it's super specific. But if you can generalize it even a little bit and make it more searchable, that's great. And then the final thing I'll say is, be respectful of the time of the people who take that gets used up when they're answering these questions. So, sometimes I'll find stuff and I can answer it in 30 seconds, and sometimes I will spend half an hour answering your question. And when I do that, it's real nice if you can give me some feedback if it didn't work, or if it did work, please accept it or upvote it or both. Just showing the person that, hey, like I evaluated this and then it didn't work or it did work, and giving them that feedback is helpful not only to the community, but also to the person taking time to help you out.
Totally. All right.
Well, over.
Yeah. So I gotta get going. We're redoing our kitchen and we have people coming over tonight, so I gotta like mount cabinets and crap. But I want to say thanks to you, David, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. And so if you do want to talk to or ask questions of like probably one of the top scaling Meteor apps right now, you should tune in Thursday, May 7th. Actually, at the same time, we're going to do 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking to Brad Vogel from Mixmax, and we'll talk about his scaling experiences and actually why they've ditched Blaze and they're using something else on the front end. So yeah, tune in for that. I think it'll be a great conversation. Again, I think they're like one of the bigger scaling apps out there right now. And they're very, like, I guess Gmail plugins are very susceptible to slowness, and people don't like it when they're slow. So funny stuff. All right. Well, again, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and thanks for coming on the show, David.
Thanks, Ari. See ya.